Hey guys, how are we doing? Welcome to the first edition of a new show I'm rolling out on the Boxing Deep Dive YouTube channel. It is called In Focus. Now, if you're unsure about what In Focus is and what it's going to be about, pretty much we're going to do, well, as it says there, In Focus. So you can see that the first fighter we have tonight or in this episode is Oleksandr Usyk. So we're just have a quick overview of his career and then get into matching him up against 10 fighters from different eras. And then we'll give our, or my, and you can obviously be in the chat, my perspectives on things and who I think would win and why. Now, I also did all these fights on Instagram yesterday. I put a poll up of every single fight, so I'll reveal those results as well. Some interesting ones there, I will say. He didn't get much love in a lot of the fights, but got plenty of love in others. So we'll go through those as well. So again, as always, I'll just continue to do my thing, but make sure you put in any thoughts, comments, whatever it might be, obviously predictions as well, into the chat and let us know what your thoughts are about Oleksandr Usyk. And I've started with Oleksandr Usyk because obviously heavyweight. We'll work our way around, but arguably the number one fighter in the sport at the moment. And he does perplex a lot of people, does Oleksandr Usyk. A lot of fans out there, where does he rank in the scheme of things? So it'll be fascinating to get your thoughts. And as I said, I'll put up the, let you know the results of the poll that I did as well. Now, just one thing before we get into it. So, look, and I'll probably get a lot of people saying, why haven't you got some of the really old fighters in there? And that is because it's really hard to match them up. And for instance, in tonight's episode or this episode, I haven't got Rocky Marciano, I haven't got Joe Louis, I haven't got Jack Dempsey, and I know they're all-time greats. It's not necessarily about matching him up with the all-time greats. In other divisions, we might do it. It just really depends on, the fit of the fighter. And I just don't think comparing Oleksandr Usyk or potentially imagining him fighting a Jack Dempsey or a Joe Louis, maybe a Joe Louis, but a Rocky Marciano, it's just hard when they're from such different eras. I think we just get a better indication of where we place Usyk from probably, and a lot of these other fighters will do it with probably from the 70s onwards, if that makes sense. So, and again, I know it does say in focus and matching against some of the best, but not all-time great. So don't come at me and say, why didn't you have Jack Dempsey or Joe Louis or Rocky Marciano in there? We've got a couple in the chat already. What do you got there, Tony? Why, oh, why did Joshua carry on the way he did after loss to Oleksandr? Well, I suppose only Anthony Joshua knows that, Tony. I think he's recovered all right, though, has Anthony Joshua, but he did handle that loss pretty badly, didn't he? So no Anthony Joshua in there tonight, mate. He's already dealt with him. He's already dealt with Tyson Fury. He's already dealt with a few. So, and what's that, dry turkey? Interesting live. Well, I try and mix it up a little bit, dry turkey. If we just do the same things as everyone else, well, why bother? It's a lot of, it's one thing I've always prided myself on is that we don't go down the same track as every other YouTuber out there. Nothing wrong with that, of course, with what they do. But as I said, if I'm just going to roll out the same old thing as they do, well, do you get anything out of it? I certainly don't. So this is why I'm going down a different path. And look, I was going to call it something on the lines of, dream fights and the name of the fight or whatever it might be, but I've stuck with In Focus at the moment. Garden snake mentality. What do you got there? You aren't a big Rocky Marciano guy. Look, Marciano guy. Look, I'm not garden snake, but not to say I don't think Rocky Marciano was a great fighter. I just don't think he would have lasted against some of these big heavyweights you're about to see soon. So I love Rocky. I love what he brought to it, but I will not get hung up. I'm trying not to get on my soapbox early on, by the way. It's not really about that. But I'm not a big Rocky Marciano guy because it's always about the record, the 49-0. Well, I don't put anything into numbers. I don't care what the numbers say. It's 49-0 or 149-0. I don't go by that. I go by the resume itself and who they fought, the fights they've been in, how the results went, all the rest of it. And it's just my honest opinion, Garden Snake. I just don't think Rocky Marciano would have held his own against these guys. It's not because, he was a bad fighter. Look, these guys are monsters, or monsters, I should say. I always get in trouble for saying monsters. But he was a small guy. He got busted up really easy. I think he really struggled with the probably over-the-hill great fighters that he fought, like Joe Louis and Jersey Joe Walcott and Ezzard Charles. I just think the way he struggled against those aging champions, I just don't think he would have cut it against those types of guys. But it's just an opinion, Garden's sake. I'm not saying he wasn't a great fighter. I just don't think it was as great as maybe another 10 or 12 in front of him. That's all. All right, let's have a quick look at Oleksandr Usyk before we get into the matchups. Now, just to get on the matchups, I'm going to go I'll just mix them up from all the different eras and see what you've got. As I said, the more are going to be from the 70s onwards. But I want your opinions. Give me your views. I wish I could do a live poll, but this software doesn't allow me to do that. So I'll just do it. I've got them written down here, the results, and we'll just go through that. Garden State, not a bad one there. Maybe we could do that. Rocky versus Artur Beterbiev at 175. Or maybe at cruiserweight. Not that there's been many great fighters at cruiserweight, has there? Although we have got Oleksandr Usyk and Evander Holyfield, haven't we? So you never know, Garden State. Well, we might find a spot for him somewhere. There might be another heavyweight that we do that maybe we can include him. But as of this episode, the answer is no. All right, a little bit about Oleksandr Usyk for starters. He was born in Simferopol, Ukraine. I've just got it here in front of me. Simferopol, Ukraine, January 17th, 1987. He had an amateur record of 335 wins, 15 losses, made the quarterfinals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, a gold medalist at the World Championships in 2011, won the Olympic gold medal in London in 2012, and then turned pro in 2013 with a fifth round stoppage of Felipe Ramiro. Some of his more important wins, he obviously started off as a cruiserweight. In September 2016, he beat, I'm going to try and get this name right, Krzysztof Glowacki for the WBO cruiserweight title. It was a 12-round decision. In January 2018, had a 12-round decision over Marius Briedis for the WBC cruiserweight title. And in July 2018, he beat Murat Agasiev for the IBF cruiserweight title. The WBA belt was in there as well. And obviously, he was the undisputed cruiserweight champion. In October 2019, he moved up to heavyweight and stopped Chaz Witherspoon in the 7th round. And since then, has pretty much cleaned out the division. In September 2021, he had a 12-round decision over Anthony Joshua for the WBA, WBO, and IBF heavyweight titles. Backed that up almost a year later in August 2022 with another 12-round decision over Anthony Joshua in defense of those three belts. In August 2023, he stopped current IBF heavyweight champion Daniel Dubois, the 9th round. And the last couple of fights, back-to-back wins over Tyson Fury. The first one in May 2024, and then again in December of 2024, another points win there. And currently has a record of 23 wins, 0 defeats, and 14 KOs. All right, what do we got there? We've got a super chat. Well, thanks very much, Andy. Really appreciate that, mate. $10. Thank you very much. Just my small contribution to the appreciation fund. Thanks very much, mate. Subscribe, share, and smash that like button, please, folks. Really appreciate that, Andy. And you give it a lot, mate, so I really appreciate it. All right. What do you got there? Daniel, one of the very smartest guys in any weight class of all time, rate him very highly. Is this Oleksandr Usyk? I'm probably thinking there. Daniel, we probably should get some of you guys on at some stage, and maybe you might be one I might get on, Daniel, just to help me out on this as well. But in the meantime, it was great to have your input. Now, what's that there? A super sticker, $1.99 from Garden Snake. Well, thanks very much, mate. A red hand pointing. Oh, sorry, that's the emoji, is it? $1.99. I'm not sure how the super sticker works, Garden Snake, but really appreciate the $1.99, mate. It's very much appreciated. What do you got there? Briedis and Agasiev, big wins. A few people, not me, actually think Briedis beat Usyk. Yeah, you're probably right, Garden Snake, but I think Oleksandr Usyk won the fight. It was tough, it was close, but I think Usyk got the win. Yeah, James, one hell of a resume. Got that right, mate. 100%. All right, shall we get into it? Now, this is always risky, by the way, because you never know what is going to come back from you guys and girls out there, because this is live, obviously. It's a little bit different when you get comments and all that later, because people have their say. And if you're listening afterwards on Spotify, watching on YouTube, all good. Well, you can't really do it on Spotify, can you? But on YouTube, put your thoughts there. I want to hear. It's not me saying I know everything. and what I say is gospel. It's just me saying, hey, this is my opinion, and what's yours? And also the results from the poll. Very, very interesting results. All right. What will one more comment before we get into it? Sorry. Did Tyson really contribute Usyk's win to Ukraine being at war against Russia? He did actually insinuate that, Tony. Yes, he did. He insinuated that the only reason that Usyk won the first fight, I think it was because they were at war, which is from a pretty classy guy in Tyson Fury, a pretty unclassy, is that a word? Classless, we'll say, comment from Tyson. Oh, look, at the time, he was obviously frustrated, but not a great thing to say. All right, let's get into it. The first one we're going to match him up with. This is maybe a controversial one. Maybe could have been in, maybe not. There could have been some other fighters we put in front of him, but I'm going to match him up with this man, James Buster Douglas. I'll just get that comment off the screen there. James Douglas, 37-6, 1 draw, 24 KOs. Now, he's obviously just known for that one fight with Mike Tyson, which took place in February of 1990. But before that, he didn't have a bad record. He's turned pro in 1981, worked his way up, had an early loss to David Bowe, who, if you can remember him, he actually lost to Larry Holmes in a world title fight, had numerous other fights as well, did David Bowe, good fighter. So he lost to him very early on, worked his way through, had a draw with Stephen Tangstead. You remember that Stephen Tangstead fought Michael Spinks for the heavyweight title in 1986. Just going through his record here. Was stopped again in 1983 by Mike White, and that was in the 9th round. Had a win over Randall Tex Cobb, the boxer slash actor, in 1984. Was beaten again in 1985 by Jesse Ferguson, a future Mike Tyson opponent. He lost a 10-round decision to him, then bounced back. This is where it started to turn for Buster Douglas. He beat Greg Page, former WBA heavyweight champion, by 10-round decision in 86, backed it up with a couple of wins, and then got a shot at the IBF heavyweight title. Was beaten by Tony Tucker, stopped in the 10th round, worked his way back again, and then with consecutive wins over Trevor Burbick at the end of, the start of 89, former world champion, of course, WBC champion, and then another WBC former champion, future heavyweight champion, Oliver McCall, beat him by 10-round decision as well, and then the Mike Tyson fight. So that was in Tokyo, Japan, with that 10th round knockout. And probably the biggest upset in boxing history. And that was pretty much it for Buster, because in his next fight, about 8 months later, he was stopped in very disappointing fashion by the real deal, Evander Holyfield, and never really recovered. He had 6 years out of the ring and actually came back and had half a dozen wins and pretty much fizzled out in 1999. Didn't get another shot at the heavyweight title, and did have a loss to Louis Savarese in there as well. So who wins and why? Well, look, I think this is probably the easiest one of the whole thing. The Buster Douglas that fought Mike Tyson, of course, would be a whole different ball game. That Buster Douglas is the classic example of someone who just fought out of their skin. If you remember, his mother died in the lead up to the fight, and he was constantly drawing on her for strength. And on that night, it was almost like the divine intervention, wasn't it? Or something behind him, because this guy who'd always been known as a bit laconic, a bit lazy, a bit up and down, he'd have a good performance and a really poor performance. And obviously he'd been stopped by Tony Tucker in his other world title shot. So the expectations were that he might go on with it after that Tyson fight. And the way he turned up against Evander Holyfield was very, very disappointing, and quite simply got blown away. And in the third round, got that right hand, the counter right hand over the top. And look, I don't want to cast aspersions on any fighter, but my opinion is that I think he just thought it was a lot more comfy on the mat that night, taking the 10 count and maybe living off that Tyson fight forever than getting up and really taking on Evander Holyfield. And the thing is, the last fighter in history you want to be not prepared against is Evander Holyfield, because he came in prepared every single fight, and doesn't matter whether you're in the best shape of your life or not, you're in for one hell of a night. So, and that was it for Buster Douglas. So in this fight, I'll get to your comments in a second. I think that Oleksandr Usyk's work rate will be far too much for Buster Douglas. And even the Douglas that beat Tyson, I think if Oleksandr Usyk was in the condition that and mentally, physically, everything else, I still think he would have had enough to beat Buster Douglas. I think Buster Douglas had a great jab, good foot movement, pretty fast with his hands as well. But I think Oleksandr Usyk would have matched him in every category. And I think when it came down to the later rounds, when it really come down to heart and ticker and conditioning, I just think Oleksandr Usyk would have gotten over the top of Buster Douglas and maybe even stopped him late. But I'm going to go with Oleksandr Usyk by comprehensive 12-round decision in this one. Let's have a couple of your comments there. I've got a few. Yeah, Garden Snake, 42-1, Buster Douglas, biggest underdog in boxing history. Yep, which means the biggest upset in boxing history. Yep, Tony, Buster's dear old mum passed away, just before the fight against Tyson. He promised her he would win, and he did. And you remember in the ring afterwards, he was actually quite emotional. He was quite teary and had to be consoled in the ring afterwards. So it was almost like the most or the best time of his life and the worst time of his life. So great win by Buster. It's just a shame that he didn't back it up. But in this fight, I'm going to back Oleksandr Usyk by comprehensive 12-round decision, maybe even a late round stoppage. Now, in the polls, 100% went for Oleksandr Usyk. Now, when I'm talking about these polls, we probably had about 20 or 25, 30 people voted. So it's not massive numbers, but I think it gives you a bit of an idea of what's going on through the minds of the boxing fans out there. Excuse me again. And 100% thought that Oleksandr Usyk would beat James Buster Douglas. All right. Next one. Where are we? This will be an interesting one. This is a Big Daddy Riddick Bowe, retired with a record of 43-1, 33 knockouts. He was the 88 silver medalist, lost to Lennox in the finals. Now he turned pro, I think the year after, 89, worked his way up. He turned pro, 1989. So I reeled off the wins. I'll just get to his greatest hits here. He actually, in 1990, I'll go back. Yeah, it was in 1990. Probably his first big win was a stoppage win or a tied win over Pinklon Thomas, former WBC heavyweight champion. That was in September of 1990. Backed it up with a very impressive second-round knockout of Smokin' Bert Cooper. Then had the 8th round stoppage of Tyrell Biggs, who had Olympic gold medalist, had fought Tyson for the world title 4 years before. Then a 10-round decision over former WBA champion Tony Tubbs. So you can see he had a very, very good resume, did Tony Tubbs. Had a knockout win over Bruce Seldon as well. Had those crazy fights with Elijah Tillery, didn't he? One was disqualification and then the stoppage in the next one. Good win here. This is probably a guy that's not really overly known in boxing land, but I remember him coming to Australia, Everett Bigfoot Martin. So he stopped him in 5 rounds, win over Pierre Coetzee, then had the fight with Evander Holyfield in 1992 for the heavyweight title and won a 12-round decision. Backed it up with a first-round knockout of former WBA champion Michael Dokes, another second-round knockout over Jesse Ferguson, and you remember that Roy Jones Jr. fought Bernard Hopkins on the undercard. I mentioned that the other day in Walking Boxing. Sorry, guys, I'll get to your comments in a second. Then had the second fight with Evander Holyfield, and that was the Fan Man fight, and Evander Holyfield got revenge and won the title back. That was in 1993. Then when was I had the third fight? There it was in 1995. Evander Holyfield with a 8th round stoppage, and I think was he the only one to stop Evander Holyfield? I think he was, at least during his prime anyway. So a great effort from Evander Holyfield. Had those two, again, unbelievable fights with Andrew Gallotta. What is it with Riddick Bowe and these controversial fights? Tillery and then Gallotta. Who can forget the phone over their head? So, and then really after the Gallotta fight, the second fight, only had 3 fights and retired in 2008 with that record of 43-1. Just want to get a couple of comments there before we get into this one, because we are maybe about 30 seconds behind. So, Andy, salute to Buster Douglas, great underdog story, but no offense, a one-hit wonder. Yeah, you're right. Usyk dominates. Daniel says, had a great jab, Buster, but got to go with Usyk wide on points. Yep. And we're on to Big Daddy. Only one loss to the great Evander Holyfield. That is correct, mate. So So who wins and why? This is a very, very tough fight to pick. Now, you've got Oleksandr Usyk, who's not a big guy. I'm just going to look at his. I think I might have got rid of his box record. Sorry, I've gotten rid of it. But not a big heavyweight anyway. We don't need his box rec up with his weights to say that he's not a big heavyweight. Riddick Bowe was a giant. Now, he regularly fought at. I'm just going to go sort of to his prime and always fought at around 250. He got a little bit higher than that at some stage, but sort of between 245, well, sort of 240 and 250. So a big, big guy. Now, what Riddick Bowe turns up to this fight, a little bit like Buster Douglas. The only thing is he fought all those great fighters and only lost once. So, and I think he could have been one of the greats. I just would have loved to have seen him fight the likes of Lennox. It just would have been fantastic. And Mike Tyson, obviously. So what Riddick Bowe is turning up for this fight, which one are we basing it on? I'm basing it on those Holyfield fights. I think we've got to have them both at their best. Usyk's in career best form, in his prime at the moment. Same as Riddick Bowe. I'm going to put him in with the, probably, what year was it? 93 to 95 version of Riddick Bowe. I think if that version turns up, he beats Oleksandr Usyk. I think with the size, with a really good jab, I don't think he's going to be able to be pushed back by Oleksandr Usyk. I don't think Oleksandr Usyk's really going to be able to do much except try and get on his bike and box. And Riddick Bowe cut off the ring really well, and just that, only was one step to the left and one step to the right, and you had your corner, didn't he? So I'm going to go with Riddick Bowe. I think he could get Oleksandr Usyk out of there in 9 or 10 rounds. I think he stops Usyk. The poll on Instagram had it, I think it was 60% for Riddick Bowe over Oleksandr Usyk. Where is it? I've got it written here. Yeah, 60% for Riddick Bowe to beat Oleksandr Usyk. I didn't have KO or decision, but in my opinion, I think that Riddick Bowe stops Oleksandr Usyk in 9 or 10 rounds. But it's got to be the Bowe that turned up for the Holyfield fights. And this is why it's so difficult. I've got to go with them at their best. And as I said before, Riddick Bowe was just like this as far as how he turned up for fights. Let's get a couple of your comments. What's that there? Andrew, the ball basher Galotta, maybe contributed to Bowe bowing out soon after. Yeah, maybe he did. What else you got there? So we've got Tony. Ball accounts. Riddick Bowe suffered terribly from flagella. It's okay. Daniel, not sure Riddick had the athleticism to keep up with Usyk. Again, Usyk on points. Well, that's great. This is what we want. We want discussion. Andy, Usyk, Bowe would have been lit. Yeah, certainly would have. So give me your thoughts, guys. As I said, I think Riddick Bowe gets the job done just with his size and strength and his good jab. I'm not sure whether Usyk's going to be able to get settled to do what he does. I think if Bowe turns up in shape again and uses that jab and his size and his strength and his power, I think he makes life very, very hard for Oleksandr Usyk. All right, so I'll get on to the next one. If any other comments come through, I'll go back to them. But let's get on to the next one we've got there, and that is, if I can move down. All right, this is another interesting one. Wladimir Klitschko, the great Ukrainian fighter, all Ukrainian fight. So Wladimir Klitschko with a record of 64-5 with 53 knockouts. So is that going to be a factor? Turned pro in 1996. Had most of his fights early in Germany, by the way. Worked his way through. Again, I'll just get to his greatest hits before we get into his more important wins. In 1998, actually had his first loss when he was knocked out in the 11th round by Ross Purity, which is something you don't hear a lot about. Is again 11th round in that one. Came back. He actually beat Everett Bigfoot Martin as well along the line there. Had a win over Axel Schultz as well, who fought George Foreman down the track. Had a win over Chris Bird for the WBO heavyweight title in the year 2012 round decision. Then had numerous wins over that included France, both Ray Mercer was in there as well. Then lost the title in that shock second round knockout to Corey Sanders. Got back on the track and then was knocked out again, this time by Lamont Brewster in 2024. Stopped Chris Bird again. I'm just sort of going through there. Beat Lamont Brewster. Hassim Rahim stopped him as well in 7 rounds. And I think Ruslan Shagev as well. David Hay. I'll keep going through his fights here. Alex Leopai, our own Aussie, was stopped in the 5th round. and ended up with 2 successive losses to Tyson Fury in 2015, where he lost his world titles, and then in 2017 when he was stopped in the 11th round by Anthony Joshua. I'll just quickly go back to a couple of comments there. Or a comment. Usyk could have been the Evander in the second fight, though. Yeah, maybe. But we've got to pick one, Andy, and I'm going for or I went for Usyk over Bowe in that one. So who wins, Wladimir Klitschko or Oleksandr Usyk? Now, and Klitschko was another big guy, sort of 240 to 250, and I know someone out there's probably going to say, why didn't you put his brother in there? I couldn't have both. I've gone for Wladimir because I thought he had the better resume. Yeah, Tony, Dr. Steelhammer, that is his nickname, of course. Such a smart, capable fighter. I don't think it's a stoppage will go the distance. Look, this is a tough one. Daniel says it's an easy one. Usyk, old Vladdy Pie, a bit too stiff for mine. Alexander by the length of the Flemington Straight. Well, I'm not going to say it's by the length of the Flemington Straight, Daniel, but I am going to agree with you, mate. I think that Alexander Usyk wins this one. I just think Klitschko is just a little bit wooden for me. I just think with Usyk's style, I know Klitschko's a big guy and he can punch out all those knockouts, but I just think Usyk with his versatility, his speed, I think his work rate, I just think his whole kit of punches, or his whole kit of ability, everything that he brings to the table, I just think that Klitschko would really struggle to get off against Usyk. I think Usyk would be in and out, he'd be off to the side, he'd be punching in 3s, 4s, 5s. And I'm just not sure Klitschko can go with him. So I'm going to go with Alexander Usyk by unanimous decision. Wouldn't be an easy fight. Klitschko was obviously a very good fighter with that record. I don't think he knocks Klitschko out as a couple of those other fighters did, but I just think Usyk by unanimous decision for me. So I am going to agree with you on that one, Daniel. What's I'm just looking at the comments there from everyone else. What he has got, Andy. Interesting fact. Sanders beat Vlad, so big bro Vitaly got revenge. But Vitaly lost to Bird and little bro Vlad beat Bird. Yes. Now, this is probably another thing. Who would you have preferred, Vitaly or Wladimir? As I said, I only had to pick one, and I've gone for Wladimir. But who would have won out of Vitaly? I think it would have been a very similar fight with Vitaly and Alexander Usyk as well. But it would have been a fantastic fight in the day. And how big would it have been in Ukraine to have 2 Ukrainian heavyweights going at it for the world title? Would have been amazing. So there it is. Again, I'll move on to the next one, but keep the comments coming. I will go back. So who wins in your opinion, Usyk or Klitschko? The poll on Instagram had Alexander Usyk. I think it was 75%. Had where is it? Yeah, 75% Alexander Usyk beating Wladimir Klitschko. Vlad had a great defense. A reign. Great reign. He did. I'm not quite sure how many actual defenses that he had, but he had a lot. So great fighter. This is what makes it so hard. But Usyk for me, and 75% of you agreed with that said Alexander Usyk would beat Wladimir Klitschko. Now, this one is probably one of my favorites of all 10 fights that we're going to go through. Just one more before we go there. Vitaly was better, but let little bro have the glory, in my opinion. Yeah, good point. And Usyk for Andy. All right, as I said, this is probably one of my favorites, or if not the favorite out of all these fights, and it is the real deal, Evander Holyfield. Now, this could have been fought at cruiserweight or heavyweight, really. It would have been just as good. So, the real deal, 44-10, 29 knockouts. Remember, at the Olympics, he was disqualified in the quarterfinals, I think it was. He knocked out New Zealand's Kevin Barry and was disqualified, and turned pro afterwards at the end of 1984, and got his title shot pretty early. I think it was his, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. His 12th fight. So he fought Dwight Muhammad Kawi in July of 1986 and won a 15-round decision for the WBA cruiserweight title, I think it was, or was it light heavy? No, it was definitely cruiserweight. Defended that. He had a win over fellow Olympic gold medalist at the LA Olympics, Henry Tillman, in 87. Ozzy Ocasio was another really good fighter at cruiserweight. Had a rematch win over Dwight Muhammad Kawi. Unified the title in 1988. On this day in 1988, that was against Carlos de Leon. Then, 3 months later, moved up to heavyweight and beat journeyman, but a very good journeyman in James Quick Tillis. That was in July 88. Then started to step it up really quick. He beat former heavyweight champions Pinklon Thomas, stopped him in the 7th. Michael Doak stopped him in the 10th. Adelson Rodriguez stopped him in the 2nd. I remember that fight. Very, very good performance. Alex Stewart in the 8th round. And then got his shot in 1990 in October when he beat James Buster Douglas, as we spoke about before. And then had some ripper fights with George Foreman, Bert Cooper, Larry Holmes, Riddick Bowe, a rematch with Alex Stewart, rematches with Riddick Bowe, then the fight with Michael Moorer. He lost that fight, beat Ray Mercer, lost to Riddick Bowe, beat Bobby Ches, and then had those two fantastic, well, the second one wasn't so much, but the first one over Mike Tyson. Beat Michael Moorer in the rematch, and then had the draw and the loss to Lennox Lewis. Had a couple, 3 fights actually with John Ruiz in succession for 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. Had the stoppage win over Hassim Rahman. Chris Bird, he lost to. James Toney, he lost to. Larry Donald, he lost to. That's when the wheels well and truly fell off and ended up, as I said, with that 44-10 and 2 draw record, 29 knockouts. So, wow, what a fight this would have been. What have we got? A couple of comments there. What's that? Going back to that's Vitaly Klitschko was smoking Bird on the cards. He tore his rotator cuff. He did. Garden Snake has Holyfield. Tony says Holyfield versus Usyk. Honestly, I don't know. Flip a coin. I'm with you there, Tony. Daniel says one of the few that could probably handle Holyfield's pace. Jesus, you're not making this easy. I've hit splinters in my backside for this one. I'm with you there, mate. On the fence, I'm 100% with you. So Garden Snake says, that's talking about the other fight. Usyk and Holyfield, the best even matchup on here. I'm with you there, Andy. That's what I said. It's probably my favourite one on here. Great comparison. Holyfield resume deep. As deep as they come, Andy. As deep as they come. All right, so who wins and why? Well, the poll said that, and this surprised me as well, as Oleksandr Usyk would beat Evander Holyfield. It was 60-40 to Oleksandr Usyk that he would beat Evander Holyfield. I'm going to go the other way. I think Evander Holyfield beats Oleksandr Usyk at cruiserweight and also at heavyweight. Look, extremely close fights, and I would certainly not argue with anyone that says Oleksandr Usyk would beat Evander Holyfield. I just think they're so similar in a lot of ways. Very even as far as obviously the size goes. And when they went to heavyweight, they used their probably size disadvantage to their advantage, if that makes sense, with the movement and the punches, the work rate and the volume and all that sort of stuff. But when they would come up against each other, who would get the chocolates? We've got to pick someone. Can we go with a draw? Probably not. But look, if I've got to go with someone, I'm going to go with the real deal. I just think I suppose you've got to look at something that's going to differentiate the two. Now, Oleksandr Usyk, great fighter, great champion, is showing tremendous heart through his fights. But I just think in such an even fight that would probably go back and forth either way. I think the pace of the fight would be blistering, both going back and forth. I just think Evander Holyfield's grit and determination and heart would just be enough to get him over the line. I'm picking him by a very, very, very close 12-round or 15-round decision. Depends on which one you're looking at. And I think as looking at what Holyfield we're looking at, which one is it? Is it the one that beat Buster Douglas and then, what was it there? So then what was it after? So beat Douglas and then Foreman and then Cooper and then Holmes and had the Bowe fights? Or is it the Mike Tyson wins from 4 years down the track? I don't think it matters. I'm going to stick with my man, the real deal, Evander Holyfield by 12-round decision, no matter when they fought. And that's at either heavyweight or cruiserweight. What do we got here? Andy, I don't know. Wish I had time to study. Flip a coin. Yeah. Yep. Garden Snake, Holyfield durability was insane. That's another reason I'm picking him there, Garden Snake. I'll do film study and pick later. Hey, that's great. No problems at all. So that is the Holyfield Usyk fight. Again, we'll move on and we'll come back to that one if need be. So, yeah, fantastic fight that would be. I've got to say, though, the next one, I know these are all so hard to pick. The next one was pretty close behind Evander Holyfield, and I'm sure you will agree because I'm talking about the one and only Smoking Joe Frazier. Well, it's not smoking, is it? It's Smoking Joe Frazier. 32-4 with 1 draw, 27 knockouts. So Smoking Joe turned pro in 1965 after winning the Olympic gold medal in 64. Worked his way through. I'm just looking at when he won. He actually had a good win along the way against Oscar Bonavena, who challenged Muhammad Ali as well. Eddie Muchin was another one. George Chuvalo, a very, very good Canadian champion. Buster Mathis, he won a 11th round stoppage over Buster. And then, when was it? When did he get? I think obviously it was. He beat Jerry Quarry as well. And then Jimmy Ellis. That was for the WBC. Was it the WBA as well? It's not listed on BoxRec. But he did beat Jimmy Ellis at Madison Square Garden to become the heavyweight champion. That's, of course, when Muhammad Ali was in exile for 3 years because of the draft sort of scenario with the American government. But then he backed it up with that second round knockout of light heavyweight champion Bob Foster. Then the fight with Muhammad Ali, the fight of the century. This is the Joe Frazier we're going to base this on, by the way. And Muhammad Ali coming off that out of exile. They fought at Madison Square Garden. Joe Frazier won that one. Then 3 fights later was knocked out by George Foreman. Came back and beat Joe Bugner. Had the second fight with Muhammad Ali and lost that one by decision. That was probably the dullest one of all of them, wasn't it? Came back and beat Jerry Quarry, Jimmy Ellis. The epic Muhammad Ali trilogy. The rematch with George Foreman, and only had one fight after the second George Foreman loss, and that was in 1981, so 5 years after that second George Foreman fight where he had a 10-round draw with Floyd Cummings. So a 32-4-1 record to finish up, 27 knockouts. The pride of Philadelphia before Rocky Balboa came along, and what a revered fighter. So this is such an unbelievable fight. Who wins and why, guys? I'll see if I could get a couple of comments there. Garden Snake says, could Usyk deal with Frazier pressure and body punching? Well, if I'm going to answer that question, Garden Snake, I'm going to say no. I think this is the one fight where I think, well, not the one fight, but one of the main fights. I just think Oleksandr Usyk would be in a bit of trouble. I just don't think he'd be able to keep Joe Frazier away. Sorry, I'll go back to my screen there. So I'm just not talking to a picture there. I just think the relentless pressure and punching power that Joe Frazier had, that hook to the head, hook to the body, the getting in close, I just don't see Oleksandr Usyk being able to keep him away, not being strong enough, not having any really ammunition to keep Smoking Joe off him. And I don't think Joe Frazier would be following him around the ring. I think he would be cutting it off. He'd be getting inside. He'd be ripping inside, hooking inside. And I think he gets Oleksandr Usyk out of there in 6 or 7 rounds. I know Oleksandr Usyk's got great boxing ability, but I think he would need more than that. And you see the trouble that Muhammad Ali had with keeping Joe Frazier off him in that first fight. I just don't think Oleksandr Usyk would have a prayer of keeping Smoking Joe off his chest and doing his work inside. And I think it's a 6th or 7th round stoppage for me for Smoking Joe Frazier. Andy says, I'm thinking about Usyk versus Breedis, maybe using slightly similar. Could Frazier maul Usyk? Maybe. I think he would, mate. Tony says, Joe Frazier for me, too strong. Yep, that's cool. Guard Snake is taking Frazier. And Andy says, oh yeah, those body punches could be the deciding factor. And just those big left hooks there, Andy, I just don't think he would have anything to keep Usyk off. Daniel, all right, what do you got there, mate? No, as much as I'm a huge Usyk fan, I've got to go with the brute force of Frazier, especially if it's over 15 rounds. Yes, we're making this one over 15 rounds, Daniel, for sure. And I just don't think he's got any hope over 15 rounds of keeping Frazier at bay. Garden Snake says, some say Frazier best body puncher at heavyweight ever. Could be the case, mate. I know Tyson used to go to the body pretty well as well. But look, it's arguable, all these things, isn't it? But for me, Joe Frazier, 6th or 7th round stoppage. On the poll, it was Joe Frazier, I think 70% choosing Smoking Joe, 30% chose Oleksandr Usyk. So well and truly in favour of Smoking Joe Frazier. All right, let's move on. Again, I'll come back to your comments if you want to put some more in there about that particular fight. This is another very, very interesting one, as they all are. This is Lennox Lewis, the Lion, the Olympic gold medalist from 1988, turned pro in 1989 in June. and made his way through. Now, he actually turned pro, interestingly, in England. Won the gold medal for Canada, and then turned pro or went back to Britain. I think he might have been born in England, was he? I think he might have on his box rec. Yeah, was born in the UK, so went back there, but represented Canada at the Olympics, which is very strange. All right, so worked his way through. What have we got there? Hang on, Garden Snake. Don't want to be too, not to be fair to Usyk, but the man, these matchups are brutal. Well, this is what it's about, Garden Snake. It wasn't about matching him up in non-entertaining fights. This is what it's about. All right, so his first probably notable win was in 1990 when he beat former WBA cruiserweight champion Aussie Ocasio. He had a win over Gary Mason in England, the former English champion. Then probably his first major win was Mike Weaver, former WBA champion. He stopped him in 6 rounds. Glenn McCrory stopped him as well, I think he won a challenge for a world title. Tyrell Biggs, a former Olympic gold medalist, again had fought Tyson, stopped him in 3. We'll keep moving through there. And then Razor Ruddock. That was a great fight. Stopped Donovan Razor Ruddock in the 2nd round. And then beat Tony Tucker in the biggest win of his career up to that stage for the WBC heavyweight title. That was over 12 rounds. Defended it with a 7th round stoppage over everyone's second favourite fighter, Frank Bruno. Lost it in sensational fashion to Oliver McCall in 1994 in the 2nd round. This is an interesting one too. In 1995, actually beat our man, the Aussie, Justin Fortune, in the 4th round. Had the 6th round knockout of Tommy Morrison. The 10-round decision over Ray Mercer. Beat Oliver McCall in the rematch by 5th round stoppage. Beat Andrew Gallotta by 1st round knockout. Shannon Briggs by 5th round knockout. And then had the Holyfield fights. I'm just going to continue going because his resume is so deep. We'll keep going. Franz Botha, David Tua, massive fight at the time. Beat him over 12 rounds, Knocked out by Hassim Raham. Beat him in the rematch. Had the Mike Tyson fight. And then ended up with the Vitaly Klitschko stoppage in 2003 for that 41-2-1 record with 32 knockouts. So what do we think, guys? Andy says Lennox via stoppage. Garden Snake says Emmanuel Stewart version of Lennox all day for me. Tony says, don't be shy in there either, guys. Put your comments in there. Tony says Lennox Lewis, poor. Alexander, maybe he should have stayed at cruiserweight. Lennox knocks out Usyk in 5. Andy says Lennox too big, too strong, can box, great power. Yeah, Lennox for me via stoppage. Yeah, and says to Garden Snake, definitely brutal. Yeah, look, I think, and I'm pretty sure, I reckon actually there might have been a couple of people that actually went for Usyk, but I think it was more like about 80 to 85% that went for Lennox Lewis. Might even been 90%, whatever it was overwhelming in favour of Lennox Lewis. Now, I tend to agree. I think probably a little bit like Riddick Bowe, but you probably think Lennox Lewis is even more formidable than Riddick Bowe because he's a big puncher as well. I think he would hunt Oleksandr Usyk down. I think he would take center ring. He'd push Usyk around the ring. He would have his way with the big punches, and I think he stops Usyk. I'm not gonna say early. I reckon it might be 9 or 10 rounds. I think he stops Oleksandr Usyk. Does Lennox Lewis. I just think the size, as I said, the power, the good jab, just overall boxing IQ. I think he's just a better fighter than Oleksandr Usyk. And, gets him out of there in 9 or 10 rounds. They're pretty hard, aren't they? I thought they would be, but that's why it's great getting your input as well. If Oleksandr Usyk thought that Lennox Lewis was tough, what about this guy? And I'm referring to Big George Foreman. This is a tough one. Was it a tough one? Big George, 76-5, 68 knockouts. Olympic gold medalist in 1968 I think it was. Yeah, 68. Turned pro in June 1969. His first win, I won't say it's a big win, but first probably name on his record was for different reasons. That was Chuck Wepner, of course, fought Muhammad Ali and who Rocky was based off. Fought him in his 4th fight, stopped him in the 3rd round. Just going to go through his record there. I'll just go back to my screen here. Worked his way through, fought very, very often, judging by his box rec here. First probably big-ish win was a 3rd round knockout of George Chuvalo. That was in 1970. And then no sort of notable wins until he actually fought Joe Frazier. And that was in January of 1973. in Kingston, Jamaica. A second round obliteration of Joe Frazier. Had two defences, one of those being that equally brutal second round knockout of Ken Norton, and then ran into the greatest Muhammad Ali. And we were stopped in one of the biggest upsets in history in the 8th round in Kinshasa, Zaire. Had two more, was it three? Hang on, where was it? No, he had, actually, I only thought he had a couple more fights, but looks like he had a few. So he beat Ron Lyle. He got off the canvas against Ron Lyle, beat Joe Frazier again, then had that fight with Jimmy Young in 1977 where he lost a 12-round decision, and we didn't see him for 10 years. It was with George Foreman, and then he was a laughing stock and had, I think he might have had like 18 fights or something, and no one took him seriously. Did have a win over Dwight Muhammad Kawi, I remember, in 1988, the year after he came back, and it was so comical because George Foreman was about, 6'4", 6'5", Dwight Muhammad Kawi was about 5'7", 5'8". It was quite comical, but he stopped him in 7. Then it started to get serious when he beat Bert Cooper, when he stopped him in the 2nd. He also beat Everett Bigfoot Martin. He seems to be the common opponent for a lot of these guys. And then the second round knockout of Jerry Cooney. Gentleman Jerry Cooney knocked him out in 1990, and then had the fight with Evander Holyfield. And even though he lost a clear-cut decision on all 3 cards, he gave Evander all he could handle, and he wasn't done, because he came back. He had a couple more wins, including over Alex Stewart, lost to Tommy Morrison for the WBO title, then beat Michael Moorer in the fight after that to win the World Heavyweight title, beat Axel Schultz, then so he didn't actually lose the titles in the ring, which I thought that was the case. Came back in 1997 and lost a 12-round decision to Shannon Briggs. But yeah, final record, 76-5, 68 KO. So the big question here is, which version of George Foreman are we looking at? And I'll give you one more view of George Foreman there. What a formidable guy that he was. So look, I think we're going to have to break this down into two predictions, because we simply can't rate Usyk against both versions of Foreman and come to a conclusion, because they were just different fighters. The fighter that was in the first incarnation of George Foreman was that big, hunting, brutal type of, like almost like an assassin, the way he went after opponents, wasn't he? Just a big, strong guy who just hunted these guys down. And then you had the second version of George Foreman, who hit just as hard and was just as aggressive, but sort of took his time a little bit more, and obviously didn't have the timing, and maybe didn't have as much power, because obviously he was a lot heavier, a lot slower. So I'm going to give 2 predictions here. One is the first iteration of George Foreman, and then the second is the second iteration of George Foreman. I'll get a couple of your comments first. Oh, okay. Hang on, where are we? Garden Snake first. Could Usyk do a Jimmy Young or Ali and outsmart Foreman? Good question. Glenn, how you going there, mate? My first question is, how big is the ring? 20 foot, we'll say, Glenn. So a good size, but not too big, not too small. We'll just say 20 foot. Okay, the 70s version or 90s version. We're going to do both, Garden Snake. Let's give us get your opinions on both. Tony, Big George hits Usyk so hard and fast, you would think he's surrounded. Big George, and he does via a demolition. George before Rumble in the Jungle. Well, I'm going to go with the, obviously the Frazier version. Frazier / Ken Norton version of George Foreman. And then I'm going to go with obviously the one that beat Michael Moorer. All right, Glenn, I don't think George finds Usyk. The movement would give him fits. Okay. Yeah, I thought that, Garden Snake. Yeah, Foreman gave up his belt. He did, yep. No, he didn't beat Briggs, Glenn. He lost a 12-round decision, unless you thought it was controversial. But I think the scores here, 114 each. The other one had at 117, 113. The other one had at 116, 112. So I thought Shannon Briggs won the fight. But Daniel, Foreman version 1 wins, version 2 doesn't. Good call, Daniel. I'm sort of with you there. Andy, dang, poor Usyk. Would Usyk be able to keep George off? Could be the Jimmy Young or Holyfield equivalent yet, or does George just pummel him? All right, well, my opinion on this fight, or fights, because we're going to have 2 of them, I think in the first version of George Foreman, I think he knocks Oleksandr Usyk out. Now, the questions, I suppose, has to remain, if Usyk gets on his bike for 5 or 6 rounds, can he maybe, this is a 15-rounder, by the way. The first fight would be a 15-rounder. The second fight would be a 12-rounder. So we've got to keep that in consideration. I think George Foreman, the state of mind he was in before the Ali fight, I just don't think he would have rated Usyk at all. I think he would have played with Usyk to some extent and just cut off the ring. And once he really got going with those punches, I think his punches would have way too much for Usyk. We saw Usyk get dropped by Dubois, even though I know it was questionable. But I think George Foreman knocks Usyk out, I'm going to say, in about 5 or 6 rounds. The second version, though, I agree with Daniel and whoever, Garden Snake said the same thing. I'm actually picking Oleksandr Usyk to beat the second version of George Foreman on points by clear-cut 12-round decision. So Foreman in the first fight by knockout, 5th or 6th round, and Usyk by decision in the second fight in the 90s version of that fight. The poll was 90% for George Foreman. There were 10% of people that gave Usyk a chance to win. I didn't actually, and I probably should have, I didn't actually give people the option of the 70s version of Foreman or the 90s version. Anyway, it's too late now. So, but either way, 90% said George Foreman would beat Oleksandr Usyk. All right, Glenn, he should have been given the decision against Briggs. Yeah, I'm with you there, Glenn. Andy, Mora was winning until he got stopped, though. Yeah, he was, but does that really matter, Andy? He got knocked out, didn't he? And that's all that matters, doesn't it? So, but then again, I mean, there's probably other fights as well that, you know, the person that's winning gets knocked out. Can't really take too much away from the winner. But yeah, I just think George Foreman too much. Now we've got 3 fights to go. Can you guess which 3 they are? Let's start with the first. Keep the comments coming there, guys. I will come back to them. Most people would say 1970s George, yeah. Well, that was probably when he was at his peak, but did we actually see George Foreman at his peak? I mean, he retired at, 28 years old, I think it was? Not very old the first time. These days, he wouldn't even be hitting his peak. So if he got, I know the Ali fight's great in hindsight, but if he didn't go through Muhammad Ali or fought a different fight, whatever it might have been, and he got to sort of 30, 31, 32, what sort of fighter would he been at that age? Who knows? Well, we will never know, of course. All right, let's get into it. Garden Snake, very good call there, mate, because the next one up is Oleksandr Usyk versus Larry Holmes, the Eastern Assassin. 69-6, 44 knockouts. Turned pro in 1973. Worked his way up through the rankings and finally got his shot at the title in 1978. Actually, before that, he had a 12-round decision win over Ernie Shavers. That's what earned him the shot at Ken Norton. I'll just go back to my screen there so you can see me. Then beat Ken Norton in 1978 for the WBC heavyweight title. And I think defended it, was it 16 times or something like that? Against the likes of Mike Weaver, Ernie Shavers again, Muhammad Ali, we're not going to count that, of course, Trevor Berbick, Leon Spinks, Ronaldo Snipes, Jerry Cooney, probably the biggest heavyweight fight of the 80s, arguably, until 88, until Spinks fought Tyson. But up to that point was probably the biggest heavyweight fight in a decade. Or was it? Yeah, probably 74 since Ali and Foreman. Then Tim Witherspoon probably gave him his hardest fight during his reign. Marvis Frazier, of course, the son of Joe Frazier. Bone Crusher Smith, David Bowe, Carl the Truth Williams, then was upset by Michael Spinks, lost the rematch to him about 7 months later, was knocked out by Mike Tyson about a year and a half after that, and everyone thought that was it. 3 losses in a row. I think he might have been 35, 36 or something at the time. And that was it, according to many, for Mike Tyson. But he got back on the comeback trail 3 years later after that Mike Tyson fight. And a lot like George Foreman, you can almost intertwine them together with the same sort of career. George Foreman's probably a little bit more extreme than what Larry Holmes was, of course. But that big upset win over Ray Mercer in 1992 earned him the shot out of Evander Holyfield. He did lose that fight, but performed pretty well 116, 112 times 2 and 117, 111. And then guess who? He beat Everett Bigfoot Martin, another one that had beaten Everett Bigfoot Martin. And again, made his way back. He beat Jesse Ferguson in 94, lost a 12-round decision to Oliver McCall in 95 for another shot at the heavyweight title. And that was really it. He did fight Brian Nielsen for the IBO heavyweight title in 97 and got beaten. But and also had rematches with Bone Crusher Smith and Mike Weaver. And then ended it with that win over Butterbean in 2002. And that was it for Larry Holmes. So again, guys, who wins and why? Let's have a look at your comments here. Glenn says, thing about Frazier and Norton was how big the rear, this is about Foreman, was the big rear uppercut played a part in those victories, using the long guard push to position them. That worked given the styles not suited to Usyk. I think that big uppercut would have been a big difference in that fight. Then I'm not sure Usyk would have been able to survive that. All right, so Glenn, Larry, very hard for Usyk, that jab and iron chin. Garden Snake says Larry Holmes will force Usyk to become a brawler. Holmes by unanimous decision in 12 or 15. I think we'll make this one, I don't think it matters, but we'll make it a 12-rounder, I think, this one. Usyk could pass as Spinks. Yes, good call, Andy. I like that. Tony says Holmes by decision. Holmes was, I think, 42 or 43 when he beat undefeated Mercer. Incredible. Yeah, he was, mate. So that was in 92. He would have been 40, or at least 42, I reckon he would have been. Who was that? Garden Snake. So I think he was 32 when he beat Jerry Cooney in 1982. Yeah, so look, I think the version we're going to go with here is the Holmes that fought in the early 80s when he beat, let's go back to that record there. So he beat Trevor Berbick in 81, Leon Spinks in 81 as well, Renato Snipes in 81. He beat Jerry Cooney in 82, Tex Cobb in 82 as well, defender Lucian Rodriguez, and then Tim Witherspoon in 1983. And then I think the Marvis Frazier fight in November of 83, that's when I think was the last of peak Larry Holmes, because then he fought Bone Crusher in 84. It was a year later, and I just think he'd really dropped off a little bit by that stage. Did beat David Bay and Carl Williams after that, but I'm going to go with the Larry Holmes from 1981 to 83. And I think that version of Larry Holmes is far too much for Oleksandr Usyk as well. I think that stiff jab, the size. You're right. Who was it? Usyk. Andy said Usyk could maybe do a Michael Spinks, but I just think the version of Larry Holmes in up to about 1983. You got to remember Spinks was 85, and Larry was showing real signs of slowing down. I think he was only sort of hanging around at the time because he wanted to break the record. But you're right. The speed and the work rate and everything, and the footwork and everything of Usyk would have given Larry Holmes trouble. Whoever I said before, Andy. But I just think the 81 to 83 version of Larry Holmes was a lot lighter, a lot quicker. That jab was a lot stiffer, and I just think that version of Larry Holmes beats Oleksandr Usyk. I think on points. I think Usyk's got enough ring smarts to keep away from Larry. Have his moments. I don't think it's one-sided, but I think Larry Holmes wins that fight by unanimous decision over Oleksandr Usyk. And again, that is the 1981 to 83 version of Larry Holmes. On the poll, this was the interesting one. That the poll was 55 to 45% for Oleksandr Usyk. So the people that voted out there actually thought that Usyk would beat Larry Holmes, which I pretty much couldn't get my head around. But that's the way the poll went. Garden Snake, Glenn Norton, sorry, talking about Norton and Ali. How Holmes got up from that Shavers knockdown was nuts. He had heart, Garden Snake. He really did. He had a ton of heart, Larry. He got knocked down by Ronaldo Snipes as well. He got knocked down by, didn't get knocked down, but got rocked badly against Bone Crusher Smith. He was in a bit of trouble against Tim Witherspoon as well. And he had some tough fights. He had a ton of heart, Larry Holmes. Just one of the most underrated fighters, I think, in the history of boxing. And this is why I've got him at number 3. I actually had him at number 3 all time on my list of heavyweights. I had Ali 1, Lewis 2, and I had Larry Holmes at number 3, and probably George Foreman at number 4. So we're not going to get into that, by the way. Don't give me your pound for pound or your heavyweight pound for pound list of all times. We're not talking about that at this stage, okay? We'll do that another time. We're talking about Holmes versus Usyk, who wins, and Larry Holmes for me. Daniel, Usyk, perfect style to beat Larry. Yep, that's cool. So who wins? Daniel, not sure you gave us your prediction there. No, give it to us there, mate. I'll move on, but put your prediction in there. Most people going for Larry Holmes in that one. But again, as I said, on the poll, it was actually Oleksandr Usyk, 55% to 45%. All right, 2 more to go. And I think you can imagine who is coming up. The first one, this is sure to create some talk. I'm talking about Iron Mike Tyson. 50 wins, 7 losses, 44 knockouts. Now, this version of Mike Tyson for me is extremely easy. This is the Mike Tyson that fought up until Michael Spinks. So in 1988. I'll quickly go through his record. He turned pro in 1985 and had a hell of a lot of fights in his first year. So he turned pro in March of 85 and he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think it's 15 fights in his first year, did Mike Tyson. In his first year, just amazing. I'll just go back to my screen. They moved him up the ranks really quick. He was only a kid. He was just bowling him over one after the other. He beat James Quick-Tillis in his first probably real test at heavyweight. That was in 86. Went the distance with him. And also went the distance in his next fight against Mitch Green. Remember, he had another fight with him in the street a few years later. And then they matched him up with Marvis Frazier in 1986, that first round destruction of Marvis Frazier. Good test against Jose Revolta, Alfonso Ratliff, really good tune-ups for Mike Tyson. And then he got his shot in 1986 and demolished WBC champion Trevor Berbick in the second round. Backed it up only 4 months later when he added the WBA title to that resume with the decision over Bone Crusher Smith. 2 months later, or 2.5 months later, beat Pinklon Thomas. 3 months later, he beat, not even, it was 2 months later, he beat Tony Tucker for the IBF belt. And then one more fight in 1987 in October against Olympic gold medalist Tyrell Biggs. So in 1986, 80, how many did he have in 86? He had, a lot of fights to get your head around here. Where is it? He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 fights in 1986 that culminated in that win over Trevor Berbick. Then in 1987, as the heavyweight champion, to unify the title, he had another 4 fights as heavyweight champion. So against Bone Crusher, Pinklon Thomas, Tony Tucker, Tyrell Biggs. Then only 3 months after that, he beat Larry Holmes. 2 months after that, he beat Tony Tubbs, and then in June, beat Michael Spinks in 1988, June 1988. That is the Mike Tyson we're going to base this fight on. This is when he was peak Mike Tyson. And to think he wasn't even 23 years of age is just mind-boggling. I'll go in a little bit more with his career. After that win over Spinks, look, he had a couple more fights before that Douglas loss. Frank Bruno, Carl the Truth Williams, 2 knockout wins. Nothing wrong with those wins, but I just don't think he had the same fire, especially in his belly, especially that Bruno fight. Turned up out of shape. Came back after that Douglas fight with wins over Henry Tillman, Alex Stewart, Razor Ruddock a couple of times. That Peter McNeely fight, remember that one. Won the heavyweight title for the second time over Frank Bruno. Out of the WBA belt, I think it was, against Bruce Seldon. Had those 2 losses to Evander Holyfield, and then it sort of went downhill after that really quick. Fought Lennox Lewis, and that was about it. And ended, unfortunately, on that loss to Jake Paul, which is a real shame. So that is the Mike Tyson we're going to base it off, guys. What have you guys got to say? I'll bring him up again here. There it is there. Oleksandr Usyk, Mike Tyson. Who wins and why? What do we got here? Just quickly, Daniel said Usyk by decision over Larry Holmes. Okay. All right, Garden Snake. I'm not a Mike Tyson guy at all. You probably forgot. But we got into a long debate on live stream like 8 months ago. Yep, I think I do remember that, mate. Tony says, early days Tyson for me, but if we talk Tyson after he came out of the clink, and then I say Usyk. Andy says he's been meaning to do this comparison right here to see how Usyk truly stacks up versus others. But my list is really more accomplishments based in different eras. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'll just get a drink here. All right. Daniel says Tyson by KO. Speed, head movement, ridiculous power up, through from ridiculous angles too. Garden Snake has 80s Tyson over Usyk, even though it pains for me to say. Come on, Garden Snake. Give him a bit of credit, mate. I've got 80s Mike by destruction. I don't like the matchup for Usyk at all. Andy, early version, dedicated Mike. Mike wins. Late Mike, Usyk wins. Yep. Garden Snake. Holmes high, even though he didn't unify. Just getting back to Larry. There wasn't much to unify back in the day, though, Garden Snake. I mean, he had the WBC belt, gave that up to take the IBF belt. And at the time, I suppose, who was it? It was probably Witherspoon, Pinklon Thomas, Mike Weaver was in there as well. I think he might have fought for it as well. WBA was Tubbs and Greg Page. Yeah, you're right. And Bone Crusher was in there as well. Yeah, maybe, mate. I don't know. I just think at that stage, probably it wasn't as high as it is these days to unify the belts. I think everyone saw Larry Holmes as the champion, and that was about it. All right, so who wins between Oleksandr Usyk and Mike Tyson? For me, this is a very, very easy one. I think Mike Tyson, that 1988 version of Mike Tyson, not the later one. I think he gets a bad rap because of the later on fights that he had after probably Holyfield. For me, the 1988 version of Mike Tyson, I don't think really anyone would have beaten, if I'm being honest. Bar maybe a Muhammad Ali, maybe a Joe Frazier, I don't know. But Oleksandr Usyk, for me, is certainly not in that category. I just think Mike Tyson would be on him from the first bell. Usyk wouldn't have the power to keep him off. Mike Tyson's work rate was pretty hectic back then as well. Usyk, I think, would tie Mike up a lot. But I think once Mike Tyson got inside and went really hard to the head and body, I just think he knocks Usyk out. I don't think it'd be particularly early. And Mike Tyson, again, this is the other thing we could probably throw in there. If Oleksandr Usyk makes it past the 6th or 7th round, what happens then? Can he then come on? Now, remember, we asked this same question when Mike fought Michael Spinks. I remember everyone saying, geez, if he can just get past the 3rd or 4th or 5th round, Michael Spinks can win. Didn't get past the 2nd minute, did it? So I don't think Oleksandr Usyk goes out the same way as Michael Spinks, but I just think this has got knockout written all over it, and I just think Mike knocks Usyk out 5th or 6th round. Let's go with that. 5th or 6th round, I think he gets Usyk out of there. On the poll, 95% said Mike Tyson beats Oleksandr Usyk. And he says 1988 version of Mike was a mauler. Certainly was, mate. So who wins? Give me your comments there. As I said, 95% said that Mike Tyson would beat Oleksandr Usyk, and I'm going with that one as well. So which means we've got one fight to go. Again, put your comments in there, guys. I'll come back. One fight to go. And again, I think this one's pretty obvious. We've got to leave him to last. I'm talking about the greatest, Muhammad Ali. Who wins and why? This is a really, well, is it a tough one? I think it is to some extent. I'm trying to picture both of these guys in the ring at the same time. It's pretty hard to actually imagine. But we'll go through it, and you can give me your comments as well. Before we move on, Daniel says agrees with Tyson. That particular time, if you had to stay disciplined outside the ring, I think we'd be talking about Tyson along with Ali as the greatest heavyweight of all time. 100% with you, Daniel. I'm sure Garden Snake won't agree with that, but I'm with you, mate. It was not even 23 years of age, and he was an absolute wrecking ball and completely cleaned out the division. I don't care what state you think the heavyweight division was at that time, that had some very, very good fighters in there, and he knocked the whole lot of them out. I think the heavyweight division when Mike was around was actually stronger than what it is today. And we're giving Usyk and Joshua and Fury all the pats on the back. I think the 1980s, early 90s was a lot better in the heavyweights than what it is now. And Mike Tyson was an absolute bulldozer and cleaned a whole lot of them up. So, yeah, Tony, the walkout music from Tyson Spinks was terrifying. It was just noise. It was chains clanking, if you remember it. Pretty scary it was, Tony. I remember that like it was yesterday. All right, Garden Snake, Cassius Clay from the 1960s or the one after the 3-year suspension? Very good question, Garden Snake. I'm going to go with the Muhammad Ali that had just coming back from the exile. So the one that fought Joe Frazier. Now, you would think, why are we putting in the version of Muhammad Ali that lost to Joe Frazier? Well, since it's Joe Frazier we're talking about. I think, yeah, the Ali before exile, Garden Snake. So he was Muhammad Ali, wasn't he, before he came out of exile? But that one, up to 1970, that's the Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay we're talking about. And for me, again, pretty clear cut. I think that version of Muhammad Ali with his footwork, his speed, you name it, I think completely outclasses Oleksandr Usyk, and he wins a very clear-cut decision. However, the Ali that fought even Foreman and the Nortons, we won't worry about the Holmes fights and Burbick fights and all those types of ones, the Spinks fights. I'm talking about the even mid-70s, probably 74, 75, 76. That version, I actually give Oleksandr Usyk a very, very good shot of beating Muhammad Ali / Cassius Clay. Just on Muhammad Ali, by the way, guys, 56-5, 37 knockouts, turned pro in 1960 after winning the gold medal. And I really don't think I have to go through his resume. I think you all know what he went through at the time. But for me, I think Muhammad Ali up to 1970, clear-cut winner over Oleksandr Usyk. I'm still going to back him to beat Oleksandr Usyk in the mid to late 70s, but I would still give Oleksandr Usyk a shot, his best shot. But I'm still going to stick with Muhammad Ali no matter what era that they fought in. What do you guys think? Daniel says Ali wins. Closer than what people think, though. Very similar styles. Yep, I'm with you there, mate. Exactly what I said as well. I think, Muhammad Ali gets the job. So while you're still commenting on that, we're going to go through all of them. Let's go back and we'll just have a quick review of what I said and what the poll said. We'll go back to the first one with Buster Douglas. I said Oleksandr Usyk on points. The poll said 100% for Usyk as well. For Riddick Bowe, I said Riddick Bowe would stop Oleksandr Usyk. I've got rid of my list here. I think the poll did say Riddick Bowe as well would beat Oleksandr Usyk, but it was close. Klitschko, Wladimir Klitschko, I think I picked, I went for Oleksandr Usyk. The poll agreed with me. Holyfield versus Usyk, I went for Evander Holyfield. The poll agreed with me and went for Evander Holyfield as well. Joe Frazier by stoppage for me. The poll agreed. Lennox Lewis, I said by stoppage as well. The poll agreed with me as well. Went for Lennox Lewis. Not a lot of love for Oleksandr Usyk, unfortunately. And this is probably in light of, after he beat Joshua twice and Fury twice. A lot of people saying, well, where would they rate him in the scheme of things? Well, obviously not that highly because most people have not backed him against any of these guys. George Foreman, I said by stoppage. Give him a shot in the second version of Foreman, but not the first version, and the poll agreed. Larry Holmes, I said that Larry Holmes would beat him on points. That was actually in favour of Oleksandr Usyk on the poll. Mike Tyson, I said, would stop Usyk, and I think it was about 95% said Mike Tyson would definitely get the job done. And then Muhammad Ali, it was 100% for Muhammad Ali over Oleksandr Usyk, and I said that he would win on points over Oleksandr as well. So there you go. We got a couple of comments there. Tony's 58, been watching the science of boxing since his early teens, and honestly, I couldn't split Ali Usyk, Ali up to 1970. Yeah, yep. And as I think Daniel said as well. Sorry, I'll go back to me there. Sorry, I've got the. So yeah, surprisingly, a lot of people said the same thing. They backed Ali up to 1970, and after that, it was pretty much a 50-50 fight. And I agree. I think because you got to remember, Ali spent a lot of time later in the fight being very reactive. He would sort of lay on the ropes. He'd allow the opponent to punch and then look to counter and look to get onto him as the fight, or get over the top of him as the fight went on. He wouldn't have that luxury against Oleksandr Usyk, which is why someone like a Leon Spinks had success. I know it was a lot later in his career, but look at the work rate of Leon Spinks. Just throwing lots of punches, lots of different angles. Oleksandr Usyk is a lot better fighter than Leon Spinks was, and that's why I give him a shot in the mid to late 70s. But up to 1970, it's Muhammad Ali all the way for me. All right, Daniel, when you really look at these matchups you brought to light, it really makes you think about how special these greats of the last 50 years have been. Yeah, I'm with you there, mate. And thanks, Tony and Garden Snake. Great stream. No, I appreciate it, guys. And look, we'll be doing this. I'll try and do it every week, but if not, it'll be every sort of second week. And I'm going to bring up, it's all about the current day fighters. So I think we might stick with the current day sort of pound for pound guys. Then we can sort of move it around. So the next one I'll either do will be either a Terence Crawford, a Naoya Inoue, or a Canelo Alvarez. Let me know who you think, and we'll do exactly the same thing. Because it is fascinating, and it's interesting, as I said, when you start talking about Oleksandr Usyk, a lot of people saying, oh, geez, you've got to put him in with some of the, is in the top sort of 4 or 5 greatest heavyweights of all time based on the Joshua and Fury and even Dubois wins. But there's only really, I think, 1 or 2 fighters that, or might have been maybe more. No more than I would think maybe a couple of fighters that the poll said that he would actually beat his other fellow greats. So it's an interesting concept, and I am going to do it as often as I can. What's that? Ali and Usyk, they got the same birthday. I didn't know that there, Andy. And both won Olympic golds and both lineal. Very, very good points there, mate. Tony says, spot on, Daniel. Great memories, most especially with my father. We all love boxing, my family. That's great. That's great, mate. So, again, if you've got any suggestions, guys, let me know. But as I said, I was looking at maybe either Naoya Inoue, some great fighters. I looked at some of the guys he could come up against. The likes of Carlos Arate and Ruben Olivares. And I'm just, these are just the 2 that first come to mind. Some great, even maybe a Pacquiao at those weights as well. Some great fighters at those weights. So, we might do him. Of course, there is Terence Crawford. Look at the list of guys that he could fight. Leonard, Hearns, Duran, Benitez, Chavez, De La Hoya, Kostya, Pernell Whitaker. I mean, these are the guys that he's going to be matched up against. How good is it? Canelo Alvarez, Roy Jones, Marvin Hagler, De La Hoya, Hearns, Duran, Hagler. Wow. Bernard Hopkins, I think, did I say that? I'm not sure. But so many great fighters. It is just great fun to do. So give me your thoughts anyway there, guys, and we'll see what we can do. All right, well, I think that's going to do it. If you've got anything else to say, let me know. But let's catch up hopefully next week. Barring anything happening, we will go next week, and it will be one of those pound for pound guys, and we'll match them up against some of the greatest fighters in history, and just rattling them off. Then, wow, what some great fights we've got to cover as we go. So, guys, really appreciate you tuning in and giving your thoughts. Make sure you tune in next week at 7 p.m. same time. And we can chat more about it then. And have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.